All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the DotA Procast. Episode number 8 officially here. Excited to be here. It has been a little bit of a break. Of course, goes without saying as TI8 took place, and what an event it turned out to be. That's, of course, why we're here today, to not only kind of recap TI8 as a whole, the international that took place, but also talk about the roster shuffle now, the post-TI process that always happens every year, of course. So I'm BreakyCPK, as always joined by Elevated as my co-host. Welcome back, Donnie. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well, man. How's life?
Life's good. Obviously, with TI8 happening now, I would be lying if I said I haven't been doing anything else. There's some other games that have been out there. For anyone that follows
Blasphemy.
me, maybe knows what the game called World of Warcraft, that expansion came out. So I've been playing that a little bit, especially post TI. But obviously, I'm just waiting for the Dota 2 content to come out. That's ultimately why I'm doing it. Let's be honest.
That's fair. I mean, we're kind of in a little bit of a lull period right now,
Yeah.
so it's fair, I guess.
You'll accept it. Thank you.
I'll accept it. I
For
mean,
now.
let's be honest. I missed you at TI8. I'm sad you weren't
Yeah.
there. So I understand if you're kind of working off some of your TI depression by playing other games.
You can look at it that way too. I'll just blame that one on baby CPK, as I can for many different things. Got a kid now, life changes a little bit. No, but it was disappointing not being able to be there in person. I will say, though, the show that I got to watch from home, holy crap, what an entertaining show it was. The whole event, really the 2 weeks, I guess, of Dota 2 that took place. But yeah, you actually got to go there in person, at least for the main event portion. So, I mean, real quick, don't want to get too much into it just yet, but obviously, brief. How was it, man, going to Vancouver?
It was great. I mean, I'd only been to Vancouver for like a couple of days previously, and so it was nice to actually be in a different location. I mean, Seattle's great. The Key Arena event was always great, but Vancouver, it just kind of made it a little bit extra special because it was new. The arena was bigger, and just I don't know, it just kind of felt like a bigger spectacle, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. So would you say that it was better than Key Arena, better than Seattle, or they both have their positives?
They definitely both have their positives. I would say overall it was better. I think TI8 was better in pretty much every way, personally.
Okay.
From my own experience, as far as just like the content, the arena, the quality of the games, and everything.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think was really missing was just like the outdoor area, because it's right in the middle of the city, and so
Yeah.
there's no nice lawn where you can just kind of like lay out in the sun and watch the games, and go to the secret shop outside. So it was a little different in that regard, but I think the setup and everything else was probably superior to TI6 and TI7, which were the other two events that I went to.
Yeah, the whole outside situation, again, I got the chance to go to Key Arena last year and experience TI7 at least in Seattle. And that I know for a fact, like, that really helped. If not having that, I can only imagine how different it was. I mean, almost like you're stranded in the stadium for a lot longer than what you were in the Seattle situation. But the one cool thing they did this year, though, on top of many other content pieces, was that night show, right? Where I forget what they called it now. But it was with Wheat and Puri and Flax that hosted it. It was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
the late game, was that
The
what
late
it's
game,
called?
yeah, I think that's what it's
I
called. Yeah.
think. Yeah. So that was one nice thing about this event, was that so in the Seattle event, Key Arena, it's kind of in this park almost, and there are definitely some restaurants and stuff around there, but it's not super populated as far as having like things to do and places to eat and go out.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of have to like then take a cab or walk, like 10 or 15 minutes to get to somewhere where all that stuff is going down. Where the Rogers Arena is really right in the middle of everything, and so the late game was literally like a 5-minute walk, and
That's
then
cool.
there's just like this massive kind of just like 5 blocks of just restaurants and bars and clubs and stuff like that. So
Nice.
there's a lot to do after the event for the people that were not totally exhausted from just watching Dota all day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of Dota, obviously, a lot of sitting around, and as entertaining as it can be. I mean, some of those, there was honestly, I feel like they got a little lucky because I think it was the first day even of the main event where they had. Oh no, maybe it was the third day because it was 3 best of 3 or no 4 best of 3s that was scheduled to happen throughout the whole day during one of the days of the main event. And I'm thinking to myself, like, especially with the breaks they had in between, it was going to potentially be a really long day. Now, it just so happened all of the series that were scheduled to happen that day actually went 2-0. So, and it still ended up being a pretty late night. So I can only imagine if a couple of those series ended up going the distance, how much different that would have been and what issues they may have ran into. But overall, it seems like the schedule has worked out pretty well in the end for them. Again, you in person, would you say that was the case? You never felt like it was too much? Or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember, I think at TI6, there was one day where I got into the arena at like 9 or 8:30 even because I was there with Liquid Dota, and so we got in early. But I think I was in the arena from literally 8:30 until like 11:30 at night. And I just remember like walking out of the arena, and I felt like I just like stepped onto the moon or something like that. I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
None of the days really felt like that. I do remember that day that you're talking about specifically. I remember it feeling like it was kind of dragging and just being thankful that it wasn't midnight by the time we left.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm looking back at it. I believe that was actually the second day because, the first day they did the 2 best of 3s from the upper bracket, and then they did all the best of 1s from the lower bracket. Yeah. Then the second day would have been the 4 best of 3s. Maybe even the third day, too, actually. I'm thinking about it. Anyways, enough about all that. It's all great to hear your experiences and everything, but let's start getting down to the nitty-gritty now. Let's start talking about the actual event that was TI8 and how it ultimately played out, of course. And, well, as everyone expected, of course, OG winning it all, just the casual OG coming into TI8 and taking the whole tournament. I guess, that's what we saw coming. Oh, my God. This has to be one of the craziest storylines that Dota has ever had, for one, let alone in a TI, really any tournament, frankly. On top of esports, we're talking about esports history right here, in my opinion. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to sit here and go through every single tournament that's ever happened in all these different esport titles, but this has to be up there as one of the biggest dark horse stories that we've ever had in esports. OG winning it all.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. I wrote a blog about it afterwards, just saying, like, those are my words, that this is going to be one of the best underdog stories in esports history. Like, for at least a good period of time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just look at the circumstances of the team forming, and then, yes, they qualified in EU, but EU was thought to be the weakest region. And then you had everybody thinking that this was going to be the most competitive TI. And there was 5 or 6, 8, 10 teams that had a chance for making the top 3. And none of those were OG coming into the tournament. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, being there in person was insane. Just listening to the crowd get behind this team. And their run was unbelievable. It was really, really unbelievable. Every single time they would win a series, everybody would just look at each other and just be like, what did I just watch?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Exactly. And you also, again, it started with the group stages, right? And let's not forget, they finished 4th place, and that was very important for the obvious reason that got them to the upper bracket. They happened to finish at 9-7. They got just ahead of Fnatic as a result of that finish right there. But it's funny enough, they actually split the series against Fnatic now, even looking back at it from the group stages there. But, you even look at their group stages results, and it's several 1-1s, more 0-2s, and then only a couple of 2-0s. But their 2-0s, oh no, wait, I'm looking at it backwards. That makes a little more sense. I was about to say, over EG and Liquid, no. But no, those are the teams they lost to 2-0. But the point is that, again, this was a team that, even in the group stages, they kind of played as we almost expected, right? Getting 4th place was, maybe a little bit of surprise. And frankly, I'll be the first to admit, for me especially, as you pointed out, with the whole roster situation coming into this event in the first place, I had no thought that they were going to be top 4 in the group, let alone I did think that they were going to squeak through the group stages, but at the same time, I wouldn't have been surprised, honestly, if they were that 9th seeded team that got knocked out. So, but barely squeaking through the 9-7 record. Then that set up the eventual, of course, run that they had with the main event, where they initially got matched up against Storm, and then they went all the way, had to defeat LGD twice, of course, themselves, including the grand finals, even EG along the way, which, let's focus on that for a second. I mean, first off, holy crap, the fact that we got that matchup is just really cool in itself. And looking back at the series, I don't know about you, but for me, watching from home, that was probably outside of the... Honestly, all of OG's matches were great, but outside of really that winner bracket, especially that Game 3, and then the Grand Finals as a whole, I mean, that was the best series. And I think you could even say it was better than the Grand Finals in some ways, but OG versus EG was a great, great series.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's kind of funny, we were talking about how there's a lot of 2-0s, and I remember being a little bit disappointed after days 1 and 2 of the tournament, just because I was like, man, none of these series really felt all that close. Like, they were competitive, but they didn't really feel like I got my full Dota experience, my full TI experience. It feels like every single year, there's always at least like 2 or 3 series that are just absolutely nuts. And none of the series on the first couple of days really felt like that. So, yeah, I mean, once we got into, the OG run, just every series.
Yeah.
Every series was just a nail biter for the entire time. Every single game was a nail biter for the entire time.
It really was. Even against VGJ Storm, I mean, they won that series 2-0, but that in itself, both those games definitely were not the most decisive by any means, but that happened to be one of the more, at the same time, dominating victories of the whole event. But then, then they ran into EG, and then, like I said, LGD twice. Now, you may look at this and figure, like, well, they didn't necessarily have to, obviously they didn't have to beat the most teams. Well, that's because they got to the winner bracket in the first place. They only had to defeat 3 teams in the end, but one of those was LGD, which I personally picked as to be the ultimate tournament winner, and I know many others did as well with their run that they had coming in, and they managed to defeat them twice, as we're looking at here. But you're right, talking about the nail-biter, I mean, not only with that EG series, but again, that, as I mentioned earlier, that Game 3 specifically against LGD in the winter finals, they had no right to win that game. They were literally going to lose the game, and LGD just stuck around a little bit too long. They kept trying to, not necessarily fountain diving as a whole, but they were sticking around a little too long, and I think it was just like, it was something like Seb, and it was only 2 players alive at the time for OG, and they managed to hold them off just enough, just barely, and then they eventually pushed down a 1.
I mean, I think that game really kind of exemplified the OG playstyle, which was just utter fearlessness, like absolutely nothing to lose in every single game they played. Like, at that moment, Thompson was alive on Arc Warden. And the Arc Warden itself was kind of enabling this to happen because he was able to bubble the Ancient itself to keep it alive. But then the second that Jarek's respawned as Earthshaker, he immediately went for this big Echo Slam play. And it was just kind of like OG pretty much were just, any opportunity they had, they would just immediately seize it. There was no sort of discussion, no doubt. They would just go for it. And that was what enabled them to take advantage of these mistakes that other teams were making. And there's no way around it. LGD should have won that game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they had the game won, and then they made a mistake, which was to overextend into an Arc Warden with heroes coming back online, and OG capitalized. And that was just the story of the entire event, was just OG capitalizing on these very tiny windows that they had to pull out these games. And they did it against EG, they did it against LGD in 2 series. And that was just really the story of the tournament. Great play from OG, but also a bunch of mistakes against them. And their resilience to be able to allow those mistakes to happen after getting crushed in the early game almost every single time.
Yeah, I'm actually showing it on stream right here, the clip basically of that final push, what was LGD supposed to be winning the game. But, something else about that too was Jerax getting the Ags on Earthshaker, which ended up being... Well, a couple things with that. Ags on Earthshaker is apparently now the new meta. And then on top of that, Earthshaker was arguably the most dominant hero at this event for many teams, OG included, and this is one example of that here. As you see, again, they eventually chase them out. The buyback on Terrablet, he dies again. And then, the Arc Warden does his thing too. I just love, as I'm watching this clip, just seeing him leap every 4 seconds. Leap, leap, leap. Like, why was this never a thing before? It's just mind-boggling, honestly. But that's honestly the great thing about Dota, let alone TI, isn't it? Where these teams are playing for $25 million plus prize pool, or just about, and we're still seeing the new stuff. Like, we're still seeing stuff that we're not used to seeing throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, Thompson pulling out his weird brand of Invoker and
True.
kind of like redefining the Invoker meta. His hero pool in general, Zeus, Monkey King, like these are heroes that were not being played by very many other people.
Yeah.
Even the safe lane Ember Spirit in that last game of the grand finals, like OG, to be frank, they just like didn't care what anybody else was doing, and they just played their own Dota, and that's what happened. That's what won them the event.
Now, on that topic, actually, you mentioned Thompson. Thompson was a very big name for good reason, of course, that a lot of people are talking about with the OG success and crediting him in a lot of ways, and I do think that is fair. Now, going into this event, I mean, we've talked about it before amongst ourselves, and I've gotten the chance to cast tops throughout the year, but obviously on much, lesser known teams, really. He never really was on this big name team. In fact, that's one of the storylines that makes it so great in the end. But yeah, he was always known for playing these unique heroes, and it's just that is that what's holding him back in the end? It's hard to say, but clearly that's kind of in a lot of ways is what actually allowed OG to have the run they did. And because he was playing this Monkey King, the Quaswex Invoker, the Arc Ward, even Arc Ward in the way he was building it, going these Dagons, Meteor Hammer, etc. He did give his team, honestly, in my mind, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but if you're to pick an MVP of OG, first off, it is stupid difficult because outside of Notel, nothing against him, but outside of Notel and his play, I think you can argue a good argument that the other 4 players deserve an MVP for the team, right? With what they did throughout the run. At least that's my opinion. Now, ultimately, I would give it to Thompson because of the hype and the uniqueness and everything, but I could see an argument for at least the 4 out of the 5.
Yeah, I mean, I have to include Notail in that as well. Like, you have to just kind of believe that he had a lot to do with, both finding Thompson. Like, I believe he pushed for Thompson to be on the team harder than anybody else, if I remember correctly. And I assume that he had a lot to do with leading the team. He's playing the 5. Him and Seb definitely were like probably the main leaders, but really anybody, like you said, could have gotten the MVP. Anna's clutch play in the late game, Jerax making unbelievable plays with very little resources, Seb carrying them from the off lane when they needed it in game 4 on his axe.
That's
I mean, just pick a game and you'll probably have a different MVP from OG.
That's so true. That's, when you mention that, that's right. Yeah, that game 4. I mean, here they are down 2-1 in the grand finals, and it's looking like that this is it because they also let them get Enchantress for the 3rd game in the series, and in that game 4 that I'm looking back at right now, and I remember, Thompson got locked down. Everyone else was getting locked down on their heroes, but Seb just out of nowhere just wrecks as Axe goes off, and no doubt was the reason why OG was able to win that game 4 and, of course, set up that game 5. And then, as you also pointed out, that's where Anna specifically shined on Ember Spirit to kind of close it out in the end and take the title over LGD. Now, another funny thing about that, speaking about Earthshaker, going into that final game, my buddies and I that were doing kind of a watch party for that final day, we're all sitting there like, do not let them get Earthshaker. Please do not let them get Earthshaker because this hero has just been absolutely wrecking. Of course, especially in the case of LGD with FY, who arguably was one of the best players of the whole tournament, even in a losing effort. They let him pick it, and it's like, oh, the size came out. We're like, damn it, OG, you're getting so close. You're gonna let them get Earthshaker. And early on, it was looking grim. Ame's Terrorblade, also another very fearful thing. But man, oh man, they played well. They played well enough, Ana specifically, and I was able to do it. But yeah, that's what. And I don't think stats suggest that they played like the most diverse lineups or the most different heroes. But OG, in some ways, isn't it almost kind of Wings-esque, where they just played their own game with these specific heroes, especially in the case of Topson and even Ana to an extent, and that won them the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Like, if we have to make that comparison, right? Serenity was definitely not Wings, but if you want to find the Wings of the tournament, I guess it has to be OG.
Yeah.
Winning games off the back of their kind of unique ideas about the game and simply just better spell casting when it mattered. Like, I think there was one particular game. I'm pretty sure it was the EG game where Ana was on Spectre. It was the one where Sumail had like 32 kills at the end of the game or something like that. And I just remember this one specific fight where No-Tail and Seb saved Ana like 6 different times in one fight. And he ended up getting like 3 or 4 levels out of the fight and a ton of farm, and that was like a huge turning point. And it's just their spellcasting was just so good when it mattered. In those very tense clutch moments, OG were just the ones that really stepped up.
Yeah. Now, another side of this coin that I personally find very interesting, and maybe you completely disagree on this, but I also find it very interesting looking at OG. This kind of goes to their dark horse story that I don't know if they're okay. See, I don't want to put this harshly by any means. Like, are they the worst team to win a TI in a sense? But my point is that you look at all the positions, right? And I don't think any of their position players you could say is that top player in that position by any means. Now, obviously, they're contenders and definitely like top 3, top 5, sure. But, honestly, you look at Topson, and he's still very young, and yes, he's a flashy, different hero player, but I wouldn't put him ahead of players like Sumail, No One, things like that, You got Ana, of course, just coming back, and there's plenty of carry players you would put up on the list perhaps above him. Same goes for everyone. Seb, especially in the offlane. Yes, he has some great performances, but I would not have him as a top offlaner in my mind going into this. And Jerax is the only one that I think could actually be a good argument, but that to me just makes it even the more baffling that they were able to pull this all off in the end. The fact that they did it with a squad that individually you wouldn't necessarily see as like these crazy star-powered, amazing skilled players, but obviously together, that it is a team game after all. They made it work. So again, I don't know if you agree or disagree, but personally, that's just a takeaway that I take from OG winning it all too.
The worst team to win a TA.
Yeah, see, again, that might be a harsh way to put it.
Put that as the headline.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess there's an argument to be made about that. It's just, at the end of the day, they just really prove that Dota has almost nothing to do with individual mechanical skill at the highest level and everything to do with team chemistry, strategy, and the ability to stay cool under pressure. Like, I don't feel like there's any other way to interpret this TI. Because, yes, I mean, obviously, every single one of these players is incredibly good. If you played against them in a pub, they would destroy you. They are clearly the top players in the world. But if you had to individually look at, statistically, we need Nahazen here or something like that to look at their, their GPM and their last hit average and all of this damage done. Maybe they don't stack up nearly as well.
Well, for example, a way to even put it is in a lot of traditional sports, you got your first team from the playoffs or whatever. Like who are the best performers from a first team? And if you were to take TI8 and you got a first team, would anyone from OG be on the list? Because again, Jerax maybe being the closest, but I think you put FY over him honestly from LGD. Yeah. So the other no one from OG would be on the first team. Yet they're the ones that won the whole thing in the end. So. To be fair, I also think it does go to the fact that, again, not to discredit anything that them winning this whole thing by any means, but their journey getting there, it was sloppy at points. It was not this very clean. It wasn't like they just ran over people. Every single one of their series was very close, very back and forth. It frankly could have gone either way, and they just kept, rolling, or they just kept flipping the coin heads, as they called heads. And leading them to victory. So, there's so many things you could say about OG, but in the end, the only thing that matters is that they won TI8 and they are world champions. So.
Yep. That
All
is
right.
all that matters at the end of the day.
That actually is. Before we move on from OG, because there is still a little bit else to talk about, obviously, with the event as a whole. It wasn't just about them by any means. What do we think OG winning TI8 means just for the competitive Dota scene in general? Because, again, as we're sitting here talking, the idea that this is a team that had this roster situation, it's such a dark horse team. Thompson specifically, talk about the motivation maybe he's given to so many people out there that are like, you know what? I don't need to be on this great team from the beginning. My opportunity can come at any moment. I guess what I'm getting at personally, I think this was just great overall for Dota, and it's definitely going to fuel the fire a little bit more as far as up and coming talent.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that ultimately, again, it just kind of proves that you don't have to be like the best. You just have to be a really, really good Dota player with really, really good team chemistry, and you have a chance. And that's all you really need. Any given Sunday is a saying from football, right? But it's like it kind of applies to Dota. It's like any tournament. If you show up and you get hot and you understand the meta and you're on a roll and you believe in yourself, really crazy things can happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't mean, Joe Schmo just get off the couch and start just grinding Dota because anyone can do it. Let's be honest here. It is still difficult in the end. And even Thompson, apparently Thompson, by the way, was playing since he was 8 years old. I think I remember him saying in an interview. Obviously, this goes back to original Dota even. He's just been literally playing since then. And it wasn't until this. I also posted a screenshot on Twitter. It was something like, he had his earnings before TI8 was $2,000 something, and post TI8 it's $2.23 million or something like that.
Yeah,
you just win one tournament and you make all this money. It's easy, right? So.
Yeah, that was my favorite quote from when Machine was interviewing them after they came out of the booths. He's like,
"Oh yeah,
you had $3,000 in your pocket and you just won TI8. What do you think about that?" And Thompson was literally just like, "What?"
Wait, that just happened? Are we done?
Yeah.
We don't have to beat anyone else, huh? Okay, cool. This is easy. Yeah, it's still, even just talking about it, it's been a little bit now, obviously, since it even finished, and it still just feels like it just happened, and still there. It's crazy. It's fun, and for me personally, it's also just so amazing seeing NoTail. And specifically, and I mentioned earlier, again, maybe his play wasn't necessarily the top support player of the event, but you are right to say that his leadership clearly deserves something, because I've always been somebody that's sold Fly as one of the best captains in the world, and I still think that stands absolutely. In fact, we'll talk about EG in a second here, but I guess I think I overlooked NoTail and maybe how much impact he was having when it came to decision making as a team, when it came to captaining, etc. He's been around these games for a very long time now. We're looking at almost 10 years between Han and Dota 2 that he has been playing at a top tier competitive level. So clearly that was part of the reason of the success that he brought to the table, and it was just. The feeling, just seeing him specifically win, was amazing. It was really, really cool, and I couldn't be more excited that NoTail specifically was able to win a title here. So,
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people forget that he was playing 5 on this OG team, but he was a support player for a long time in Dota 2. And he was a really good support player. He was arguably the best Wisp in the entire game for a couple of years before he switched over to carry. And I think a lot of people kind of remember his maybe sort of sacrificial subpar carry performances on OG when Miracle and Ana were the real one of the team. But he's been a very excellent Dota and Han player for a very, very long time. And so, he's got the pedigree. And it was nice to see him win this as well. And I did want to ask you, do you think it's better that OG won and we have this crazy dark horse team, or do you think that having a dynasty like Liquid winning 2 TIs, or keeping the East-West dynamic of this LGD Chinese juggernaut winning?
I mean,
What do you think is better?
there could have been so many storylines, right? Because then you even have the whole Virtus Pro situation. They dominated throughout the whole year, them winning TI8. What would that mean, right? So, I think this is one of the, because it actually happened, so it's easy to talk about it. One of the best storylines that definitely could have happened with OG winning it. But you're right. I mean, Liquid being back-to-back champions, starting this whole dynasty, probably would be pretty cool. And not to say I don't think Dota 2 is not necessarily due for that when it comes, because in the big scheme this is TI8. It's still somewhat early on, I would like to believe. So I don't think we necessarily need a dynasty yet. But that wouldn't have been the worst thing ever either. That would have been a pretty cool storyline, especially for Liquid. Again, throughout the year, it's not like they were very, very dominant and working off of that TI7 championship, although they were very good. And again, getting fourth place, very respectable in the end. But I do think the breaking the, I don't know if you want to call it a curse or whatever, of China, West and East, is it's just a fun thing. It's not, even as we were kind of previewing TIA, I picked LGD kind of almost because of that in some ways, but at the same time, I truly believe LGD was a very good team, and they proved that here. But I don't think that really means much in the end. When it comes to the storylines here and keeping that alive, if that was necessary. So I guess that answers it. But
fair.
All right, let's talk about other stuff though. Again, enough about OG. They won TI8, great. $11 million, whatever, not a big deal. There were some other success stories out of TI8 that I think are worth bringing up at least, and we've kind of touched on several of them already. The first one being the obvious, LGD. Yes, they finished runner-up in the end, but definitely enough. Now, I want to be, because I don't want to say nothing to be ashamed of, because this was their tournament in some ways. They should have beaten OG in the upper bracket finals, as we talked about that game 3, and some maybe mistakes on their part, thinking that they had the victory already, was then taken away from them. But still, overall, their performance throughout the whole event, they had to go through Virtus Pro and Team Liquid before losing to OG in the winter finals. They did so in 2-0, by the way, in each of those previous series. I think ultimately you could say LGD was the best, most dominant team overall between the group stages and main event especially. But again, still wasn't enough to win it in the end. But I do think they should still be very proud, of course.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, especially once it got towards the last couple of days of the tournament, everybody was expecting LGD to win. They dismantled EG. They dismantled Liquid. The 2-0 against Liquid was one of the most dominating series I've ever seen. And specifically, I think it was the second game was arguably the best Dota game I've ever seen a team play. It was just so clean. And Liquid, this is a team that won TI last year, has the same rosters, looking quite good. They just look awful. LG made them look terrible in that game. And so after that game, I was like, wow, there's no team that can possibly compete with this team. Mm-hmm. So they obviously have the ability to be the best team in the world. It's just a matter of kind of holding it together when it really matters.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting because, right, we were a similar team, of course, as Newbie, where they were the runner-up last year. They looked very good throughout the event, and they came up short against Liquid in the finals there at TI7. And then this year, they were top 8, obviously, with the DPC, but, of course, especially at TI8, they came up flat. And like I was saying, I'm not necessarily surprised that they did come up flat. As far as their result with TI8. In fact, they lost a win streak, by the way, in the lower bracket round 1, to kind of reiterate how it all played out for this team. I showed it on screen. But so I guess what I'm getting at is, I wonder what direction this team is going to go, post TI8 now. Will it be similar to the kind of newbie effect, or will they kind of keep it going? Now, China, in general, I do think has a history. Most of Dota 2, though, to be fair, does have a history of teams, especially after a year, things change, whether it's the roster and their success. I mean, the game is always kind of evolving as well when it comes to strategy, so it's understandable. Honestly, that's what makes a team like Liquid or EG, for example, that's now finished top 3 in 4 TIs. Not the exact same team, but honestly, you look at Dynasty, you could almost look at that and be like, EG definitely deserves a lot of respect as far as what they've done over time here. So, and on that note, EG is, of course, another team that's got success from this event. They finished 3rd place. It was that great series against OG that knocked them down initially. They then defeated, though, Virtus Pro and Liquid to get a matchup against LGD, which they ended up losing that one 2-0 in the lower bracket finals. But as somebody that's always been I don't want to say not the biggest fan, but I feel like they've always been overhyped to an extent. And we even talked about this in the previous show a little bit. This was a very, very good performance and a finish for Evil Geniuses, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was. I think that they were probably, and maybe even still are, disappointed that they didn't win. And I'm sure that there's plenty of EG fans that are disappointed that they didn't win. However, just remembering that, I mean, they essentially formed around the same time that OG did, right? We were giving OG all this props for winning TI after forming, very, very briefly before the tournament started. EG, same thing. And so, like, they didn't have any time really to gel as a team. They had 1 month essentially, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
And they didn't look all that good at the Super Major. They looked okay, but they didn't look great. So the fact that they were able to put it all together in like a month or 6 weeks or whatever it was, and top 3 TI is pretty insane. So I believe they have already locked in their roster for this next season and looking to build on that. So maybe they're probably over the disappointment and moving on towards next season.
Yeah, see, I mean, I can understand some quote unquote disappointment, but at the same time, it's you go through a roster change like that, very last minute of the season. Well, it worked out for OG, obviously, but it's understandable if things would have been a little struggle when it came to TI8. But no, they did perform very well. Fly was definitely the leader that they were looking for, I think it's safe to say, and overall played their game. Again, that's only one team can win it in the end. In this case, happened to be OG, but Evil Genius is definitely one that has to be excited about their result. I think just a couple more teams that may be worth at least pointing out as far as success goes. Optic Gaming, I do think you have to put on that list as far as another one. And this may be a little bit of NA bias in me, sure, but at the same time, they got top 4 out of Group B right there. They managed to win the tiebreaker against Newbie, as well as I guess they kind of tied with Team Secret as well, but they beat out Newbie to claim that 4th position ultimately, and then get their first round matchup, which, yes, they got knocked down by Team Liquid, of course, but then they beat Serenity, which, of course, that team out of China, before eventually losing to Virtus Pro in a 3-game series, taking them to 3 games. So they got a top 8, though, at TI8. I think for a team like Optic Gaming, that's nothing to scoff at. Very successful result for a team like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they did fine. I think they had a pretty easy, to be honest. Like, they just had to beat Serenity to get to top 8. I don't think Serenity was nearly as strong as some people might think. They didn't look like they belonged against Liquid. And then they did take a game off of Virtus Pro, but let's be honest, this also wasn't the Virtus Pro team that destroyed everybody in the DPC this season.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it's a good result for Optic. It's a good in its first year of Dota, and for a roster that I think a lot of people probably weren't expecting a top 8 finish from.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a very good way to put it. And one other kind of noteworthy team before going to the other side here, I didn't have it down necessarily initially, but I think Winstrike is worthy of at least a little bit of a shout out there. Again, this is a team that in a lot of ways maybe had nothing to lose coming out of CIS, and of course they had that amazing Epicenter run. That's where they really came on on board there. And I mean, overall 4-12 in the group stages. They managed to squeak out against Invictus Gaming though in the ultimate tiebreaker, which allowed them to stay alive and knock out Invictus Gaming of the group stages. But then they, as I said earlier, they defeated Newbie 1-0 in that best of one, and that in itself was a nice little pay jump for the team. Of course, winning a best of one and getting them that, what would that be? That 12th through no, it'd be 12th place spot essentially.
Yeah.
For them. So I think, a team like that is you could say they maybe exceeded expectations in some ways too. So it was fun to watch that team. Always entertaining. Didn't get knocked out eventually by VGJ Storm, as you see right there. But they were a fun story to follow. I personally had them going to the lower bracket round 3 even in my predicted bracket, but they didn't get that far, at least. I did have them winning over Newbie, though, which I got to think I was one of the few. So I was proud of that prediction there.
Yeah, I mean, props to, again, another team that didn't have a whole lot of lead up to TI. Like, they started seeing some success just in the last kind of quarter of the season. And to qualify and then beat a team like Newbie on the main stage is a huge deal. And I'm glad that they did, because we were able to see a couple of interviews with them and Casey that were super entertaining. And they seem like a great group of guys. And I believe they're also sticking together, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I would hope so. A team like that would be pretty cool. Obviously all that roster shuffle situation we'll kind of go over shortly after we finish the TI8 here, but there's a lot. One more positive thing is the really just group stages, I think, as a whole. Groups now, kind of living in the moment, sure, but from what I can recall, honestly, this was just one of the better, not only just events as a whole. It really was just such an epic event for many, many reasons. But I think the group stages ended up being very entertaining as well. I do think on the production end, they actually did a fairly good job of it. They had the one stream going where they were cutting in between matches. Now, the first day they had some issues, but after the first day, I think they kind of learned what they wanted to do. And at least for me personally, I thought they did a great job of, going to matches that made sense, cutting to them when things were getting close, etc. And so it allowed you to enjoy great Dota for that whole week. What ended up being a really good group stages. We had, tiebreakers in both. One for that knockout, as we mentioned, with Winstrike defeating Invictus Gaming. And then for a winner bracket spot, which ended up being a very big deal with Newbie getting that 5th place seed and eventually getting knocked out to Winstrike, as we were just talking about there. So it had the drama. It had a bit of upsets in some sense as well. Great group stages, and one of the many reasons, like I said, why TI was a great event.
Yeah, I agree. I watched the tiebreakers on the train as I went up to Portland to fly to Vancouver. So if they weren't that entertaining, I probably wouldn't have done that.
Fair enough. Pain Gaming getting knocked out. God, that was brutal. Now, this is kind of leading us into disappointing stories from TI8 worth going over. Now, I don't think Pain Game, it's disappointing in the sense that they finished 5-11 and they still got knocked out. That, to me, it's a couple of things, really. One is that just how much great competition we had at this event overall, as far as the teams being very well matched. But
somewhat unbalanced groups.
You could go that direction too, sure. Where if they were in Group A, maybe a little bit different. But, man, 5-11 to still get knocked out, that really had to be brutal for a team that was trying to represent South America, of course. And, this would have been huge for that region. I still think the region should be very pleased, even though they got knocked in the ninth spot, just because, going 5-11, still pretty respectable at TI8. But I can understand it still stings a little bit, that the fact that they didn't.
Yeah, and I'm also a little disappointed just because I feel like this is a team that has the potential to be flashy on the main stage. I just really wanted them to get that chance to, to be the team that upset Newbie, to be the team that upset whoever after that. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously we saw that from Winstrike, but just the roster of Pain and their sort of their attitude and the style of play that they had was just kind of one of those things that you would want to see on the main stage. So I was personally disappointed that I didn't get to see that.
Well, they did play the AI.
Yeah, that was pretty entertaining.
Yeah, you did get to see them on the main stage in that sense.
They did. At least they saved us from the robot apocalypse for a little bit.
Yeah, that was something. I mean, ultimately, as expected, the pro team's defeating the AI, but it wasn't the easiest victory. I'll put it that way. I mean, obviously, Pay was definitely having some fun with it as well, as they should be. It's a game after all. Um, but yeah, other disappointing, definitely more disappointing stories. Like I said, we were already touched on this one a little bit. Now, Virtus Pro is an interesting one because they still finished fifth, sixth, and a lot of teams would have been very happy with that result at TI8. It's still a fair amount of money. It's a very legitimate placement. In fact, I still think that's over $1 million, right, as far as the as far as the prize pool goes. So, really not too shabby of a payday there. Yeah, that's just 1.1 million. But for a team like Virtus Pro, who during the regular season we constantly talked about this team being the most dominant team, in a lot of ways, finishing fifth, sixth, not necessarily the greatest. And I don't know. For me, it's just like they lost to LGD and Evil Geniuses, right? So from that perspective, not the craziest, but it still is a team that a lot of people even had going to the finals, let alone winning it all. I guess really I'm just torn. I don't know if you're different, but I'm just torn on whether or not I should really feel disappointed for VP or if this is just, sometimes how the brackets play out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they looked up to form personally. I think there was a quote from No One who said he wasn't really feeling all that comfortable in the mid lane meta these days. And they didn't quite look like themselves as far as just like running people over from minute one. Mm-hmm. And you also have to wonder just like how much team versus team matchup really plays into it. Because if you had to pick two teams that this VP team would not match up very well against, it would be a Chinese team like PSG LGD, who has incredibly good early game and also incredibly good discipline. And then Evil Geniuses, who is led by Fly, who is like the king of holding out against aggression, and then relying on his high-skilled players to carry them to victory. The only other terrible matchup I can think of in the bracket is Liquid, basically. And so, the fact that VP had to face LGD and then EG, it could just be, somewhat bad luck of the draw, but I also believe that they didn't play nearly as well as the VP that we had seen in previous parts of the season.
I do think you're right there, that the eye test does tell us that it was more than just matchup specifically of, they happen to face it. Because, eventually they're going to have to play these teams, right? Like, if you want to win TI8, you're going to have to get through these big dog teams. So that really shouldn't be the most craziest thing to expect. But yeah, No One specifically. He did not dominate, I feel like, as you almost would expect him to do, because throughout the season, my personal list, I would probably have No One as the top mid player after a lot of these events, and I don't think I'd be wrong to say that by any means, but he did not really stand out necessarily the best, and I think I do remember Solo in an interview, I forget when it was, maybe it was even after they lost to EG or their first loss, but talking about how they were just having trouble adjusting to the TI meta. It just wasn't fitting their play style. They weren't the most comfortable with it, whatever it may be. I mean, that is part of it, though. It goes back to, this is why Dota is so great in a lot of ways, is there's so many levels. It is more than just that pure mechanical play. Strategy is absolutely a big part of it when it comes to it. So something else, too, to remember is that Virtus Pro, all of their major victories were single elimination events. This was a double elimination tournament. So that also maybe plays a role somewhat as far, I don't know how necessarily, but it's something to think about too. They never had to win a double elimination event. They never had to go through, the gauntlet that was. So, but
yeah, Boris adds a lot of pressure.
Oh God, yeah, that was one of the many. Somebody's saying that in chat. Yeah, I see that. Mr. Rave Chip right there deserves a shout out for that one. Boris was great. With a lot of the content in general was fantastic actually from this event. But we're not at that yet. We're still at disappointment. China was a little bit disappointing outside of LGD, of course, in their run, but there was no Chinese team in the top 8 outside of LGD. And for a region that had, 5 teams, right, here at TI? That's and this was supposed to be their year. That's disappointing. And not that China should be in pure panic mode right now, but I think as a region, definitely it's disappointing. And now I'm not going to sit here and say this is why Valve should think about, their China events and host, because obviously, as we know now, Shanghai is going to happen for TI9. That's something else to talk about. But that was curious to me, I guess is a good way to put it, that they only had one team in the top 8.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way around it. It was definitely just TI for China as a whole. I don't think that VGJ Thunder looked like a very good team there. Obviously, Newbie got knocked out in the first round. Serenity was kind of a dark horse, but they didn't stack up against the top 8 teams, I would say, very well. And then Vici Gaming showed flashes, but they definitely didn't have consistency to be able to pull it out against any of the top 8 teams either. So, and these are teams like, obviously Thunder had some very good placements during some majors during the season. Vici also. So there was a pretty huge fall off, either a huge fall off of the Chinese teams over the course of the season, or all the other regions definitely stepped it up. I'm not totally sure which, but you would have to say that I'm sure China as a region is pretty disappointed with the fact that they had 5 shots at it and didn't win.
Yeah, only got the one in there in LGD. And again, it was LGD could have won the whole thing in a lot of ways, but coulda, woulda, shoulda. They did not in the end. They runner-up, still a very good performance. But yeah, outside of them, it was definitely a disappointing one, and it wasn't even really a case of China knocking out China. The only case that happened was Vici Gaming knocking out VGJ Thunder in the best of 1. Other than that, all the Chinese teams lost to other teams actually. So it's even more on the fact that just that disappointment that we're talking about when it comes to the region. Like I was saying though, I don't think it's time to go full panic mode by any means. Just a curious observation, put it that way, when it came to the results.
And it will be really interesting to see how they restructure with this new DPC season, because one of the rules is that you're no longer allowed to have multiple teams from the same banner.
Oh, true.
So I don't know how that's going to shake out. Like there will be no LFY and LG. There will be no eHome, eHome, etc. Vici and VGJ, I think, are technically different, but I'm not sure. And then obviously VGJ T and VGJ S will not be able to be in the same competition as well.
Yeah, see, I would have to look at that again, because does that suggest that the ownership, right, cannot be the same? Like, ultimately, whoever owns the team, they cannot have multiple teams? Because if that's the case, then there is still a workaround there, in the sense now it's shady, but, I don't own this team, somebody else does, and then they kind of do anyways. And then the name thing's an easy workaround too, right, where you just, that's not VGJ Storm and Thunder, it's, VGJ and then VGG. Like, they just change ones. Like, the point I'm getting at is how strict is Valve truly going to be on that rule? It's one of those, like, in theory it sounds nice, but I'm still not sold yet. I really would have to, again, see the rule and maybe how the season starts to play out before making total judgment on it. But that is a very good point, and specifically for China, right? Because that is the region that definitely it will impact the most, of course.
Yeah.
When it comes to it. So we are going to be talking a little bit more about the upcoming schedule, by the way. Not too much just yet information, but again, we'll go over that. Still plenty more to go over, though, so keep it going. Southeast Asia was another region that actually was disappointing. They had the unfortunate circumstance of having a best of 1 of Mineski versus TNC, so that was going to already be one team eliminated, and in the case of TNC, they were. Mineski then went on to lose to Virtus Pro in the next round, and then Fnatic got knocked out by Serenity right off the bat in the losers bracket. So all of a sudden, you have 2 Southeast Asian teams getting knocked out in the losers bracket, best of 1, and then Mineski ran into the juggernaut that was VP to get eliminated in that 12th place spot. So, yeah, I don't know could you say maybe more disappointing than China? I don't know if you really can, because there's more expectation ultimately out of China as a whole. But Southeast Asia, this region had a lot of hype. They had 3 teams here as a result, of course. Didn't really come to play, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at the group stages too. None of them were in the top 4, right? You had Fnatic finishing 5, Mineski finishing 7 at 5-11, which is what Pain Gaming finished at and got eliminated. So if Mineski was in the other bracket, would they have been out without even making it to the main stage? Who knows? And then TNC Predator,
close 7-9, yeah,
close, but unfortunately playing their biggest sort of kryptonite in Mineski in the first round. But also, why couldn't they have been in the top 4? I feel like they, on paper, could have been at least as good a team as Optic or Newbie, potentially even Secret. So yeah, I think that SEA has to be pretty disappointed, especially because all of their teams were out within the first 2 days of the tournament, right?
Yeah.
So this is a region that everybody's been hyping up. I think that they have a ton of talent. We obviously had the EE Universe, Abed, DJ team that Pilot I can't leave him out. But, Fnatic's a brand that's been around for a long time. Mineski, same thing. I think at some point, something's got to give, and SEA is really going to need to show up and make it to top 4, make it to a grand final.
Yeah.
Based on how much hype the region has.
Yeah, no, I know during the season we had even talked about this with South America specifically, and it's like, when it's great to talk about, they're getting chances and at least they're showing up to play and good, but they're obviously doing horribly throughout the season when it came to the DPC events. When is enough though? When do we get past that phase and okay, these guys need to actually start competing with the best teams to really show that they do deserve to be part of these big events with how many teams are getting whatever. And again, I think Pain Gaming is finally starting to break through for that region, and we are going to start seeing that progress. Only time will tell. But that is a good point you bring up about Southeast Asia. Now, again, not to overreact from one event here in TI8, but it's fair to bring up at the same time, and that's where you could argue that maybe it was even the most disappointing of all that we have been over in the end. But a new season upon us, a region with many players, and definitely a lot of talented players on top of that. You would almost expect more out of it in the end. So
yeah, I think Mineski has to be the most disappointing out of all of them. I'm sure a lot of Fnatic fans will disagree, but this is a team that had very good showings towards the end of the DPC season and kind of throughout it, and has arguably been, maybe not even arguably, has been the best C team for the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they were out in round 2 of the lower bracket is pretty disappointing, and they didn't even look very good. So, again, could be meta, could be matchup. It's hard to say.
All right, so that's really the disappointments that we had. Again, the tournament overall was great. There were some other things that took place. We've already kind of talked about the content pieces were a lot of fun. You mentioned the whole Boris skit with VP specifically definitely stood out. Sir Action Slacks was killing it in my opinion as far as a lot of stuff that he was creating. Specifically that Japanese segment with the Japan Dota. I forgot what it's called now off the top of my head. It has to do with
the Mara Cup.
Mara Cup, that's what it was. I love it, man. That guy that was part of it from Japan there, the one that organizes it. Oh, that guy's amazing. First off, we need more of him. We need more Japanese Dota, that's for sure. But it's really cool to just see that, honestly. These grassroots, as obviously Dota as a whole has grassroots to thank in a lot of ways for why it is where it is today. And, who knows, maybe Japanese Dota will get a big surge as a result. But that was one of, again, several segments that was great. And I personally had a lot of fun enjoying watching there. So I don't know if you had a different perspective in person. I assume, obviously, you were seeing the same content that we were on stream. But
yeah, I mean, I loved basically all of the content that they made. I really, really did like that they were, giving a shout. They gave a shout out to the South American Peruvian scene. They gave a shout out to the Japanese scene. They gave a shout out to the women's scene in, was it Brazil? I think, was that where the Minas Cup was?
I believe so. Yeah.
And so that's what we need. That's what creates a sustainable esport, is when you have a global interest in it and people who are continually coming into it from all over the place. And then the Sheever piece was unbelievable. Like
Oh yeah.
there was a crowd of probably at that time maybe 11, 12,000 people in the stadium, and the stadium was completely silent for the entire video. Like, not a word.
Yeah.
And there's people to my left, people to my right crying. It was insane. Like the whole, just all the content was, I think, just the best. Like I miss the individual players where they would go to a player's hometown. That stuff was really cool at previous TIs, but they had some of that as a full team, and I thought that was at least as good, if not better, in many cases.
Yeah, no, they definitely killed it. And, I know Sir Action Slacks specifically and was making a point that he was working on a lot of projects kind of behind the scenes that he couldn't really talk about, but now we know, this was a lot of that. Hot Bay definitely deserves a shout out as well from BTS. I know he was there as far as the content creation goes and everything. And there's several others that I'm missing, of course, but fantastic. It was a, because that's the thing with TI8. It's obviously more than just simply a tournament. I think we know that, of course, for many reasons. But it's kind of just an entertainment piece for us to just be able to enjoy this game that we all love for really 2 weeks in a row, and that content is a big part of that. And of course, there was contests that happen as well. Not only the movie contest, but especially the cosplay contest, which is always a lot of fun to watch and see how that goes. Now, I don't know. I don't know if were you even there when it happened, by the way, the cosplay contest, or?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so you're watching it there. Okay, I got a video up kind of showing it really, and in this case the final, where you have the final four here. And personally, I think the Ogre Magi should have won. I mean, that just the idea of that contest in general was great, or the costume, excuse me, was great. It just looks so good. I just can't believe the effort that these people put into these costumes as well. By the way, but it's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. The Ogre was unbelievable. The Sven was unbelievable.
Yeah, Sven won it in the end, which I don't have a problem with. I think that was fine.
And seeing that one up close, because I saw the guy walk away one of the days. Like the detail on that was absolutely insane.
Yeah,
it looked exactly like the model in game.
Oh, and the sword too itself is just amazing. The effort that went into that, I'm sure, was crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, the creativity of the Ogre Magi was really great.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm trying to find it right here. Yeah, this is the Treant Protector. I know there's a bit of drama. Good old Treant Protector. A lot of people suggested that he should have at least been in the top four. She, I don't even know what, but either way, should have been in the top four, but did not make it. I will say, as far as fluidness goes, the Treant Protector costume was actually very good. He's moving around just freely in it, and I think that kind of is important too. One complaint I did have, and I know a lot of other people were on board with this: Ember Spirit, great costume, did not have the weapons though. And to me, that's kind of ridiculous. Getting top four when you don't even have one of the most major parts of what's supposed to be the costume. I'm sorry, I'm no expert here, but that should not have been the case. So I'm a little disappointed in that when that happened. But overall, these are just so much fun to see. I love these about BlizzCon as well. Whenever they do the contests there, and just a lot of fun to watch. So I don't know if you don't sound as hyped as I was about this, but
yeah, I mean, I was really there for the Dota, but
yeah.
looking at the sets again, God, that Ogre is so good.
Yeah, no, the Ogre was amazing.
I do love how the Sven guy was breathing the way that Sven breathes in the loadout screen, and he I think both him and the Ogre were kind of enacting the way that the heroes kind of stand around and act when they're just passively there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's cool, but it wasn't the highlight of my TI8. That's for sure.
You're not thinking about it every day since then, yeah. All right.
No.
All-Star match, I didn't watch it. I don't know if you have anything to say on it. I know they did it in. I'm just never a fan of these forced All-Star matches. It just, even in traditional sports, I rarely watch them, so I'm kind of meh on them. But again, I don't know if you watched it or not.
Yeah, I honestly haven't been a fan of the All-Star since TI6. TI6 was amazing when they pulled 10 people out of the crowd, and they got to play with the pros and like pick their pros, and they introduced Underlord. That was a cool
true, yeah.
All-Star match. The TI7 one was terrible, for lack of a better word. And then the TI8 one, like, it was interesting in concept with the mutation mode and stuff like that, and obviously it was great to see LD, kind of like show up again. But I felt really, really bad for Solo in particular, because he had literally just been eliminated from TI. And then like 20 minutes later, he's asked to be back on the stage playing a game that means nothing. And that, I mean, I didn't feel comfortable, honestly, like when they were introducing him, like trying to interview him. I was like, come on, man. Like, this guy has just had the worst blow emotionally of his entire year, and you're making him do this. And SCCC also didn't seem very happy to be out there. He's another super competitive guy that probably felt terrible about having to be on the main stage with nothing to play for. There's got to be a better way to do it, just because inevitably, none of the players really care. And adding money to it like they did last year didn't make it very fun either.
Welcome to one of my reasons that I just don't really care for us, because again, traditional sports, it's the same thing, right? They've tried some clever things. I mean, MLB, for example, as you know, they tried the whole actually giving an advantage for whichever league won the All-Star game would then get the home field advantage for the World Series, but now that's even gone because they realized that probably wasn't the best idea. I mean, it's hard to. I just think it should just be a vote, and that should be it. What's so wrong with that? Why do they need to play? That's the part that I honestly just don't even really get. We get to see these guys play all the time in Dota specifically. Maybe not necessarily on the same team together, but again, when you do try to force these All-Star competitions, it does always feel a little awkward. Like some of them don't even want to be there, etc. So. I
mean, like, ultimately the All-Star match is supposed to highlight like the best players at their positions, right? That's what it always is for all sports. It's supposed to be like this, hey, these are the guys who stand out above all the other pros at their positions. Let's showcase their skill. And yet there's no like real platform to do that. The actual platform is just them playing in the World Championship, which is TI. So, I mean, I'm kind of on the same page with you there. Like, it just, I don't know, it doesn't really add much to me. I personally just kind of like offhandedly like listened to it while I was doing other stuff, because I wasn't really interested in it.
Maybe that's something we'll do, kind of a look back. I didn't really prep that for this show, but maybe in the next show, kind of like do a look back at the season, do some awards, maybe like awards for certain positions and stuff. Because like, say, hey, somebody has to do it, so why not the DotA Procast? Why don't we do it? All right, there you go, new content. All right, so yeah, a lot of stuff happening at TI8. I think that's surprisingly that's what we're at least going to talk. Obviously, there's going to be plenty more to constantly go on about. One last thing before we do move on, that's always kind of, at least I find entertaining to look over, is the data, is the stats, the hero picks, etc. that happened at TI8. Now I have the Dota buff up here for this is the overall LAN event, so this includes both the group stages as well as the main event. And again, it's so weird to think going into this event right away in the group stages, all of a sudden we're seeing, like, what was the big one? Like Wraith King. Like, all this, everyone was picking for the first like 6 games of the group stages. I think 5 of them we saw Wraith King. It's like, what? Not a hero we saw like at all this season, and Wraith King's a big deal. Tiny proved to be the second most played hero at the event, and a lot of he was considered to be a overly nerfed hero that no one was playing going in. Enchantress, again, another one that comes. Weaver, like, there's just all these heroes that it just shifted all of a sudden with the TI meta. I always find fascinating when it comes to Dota, but kind of looking through here, is anything that really stands out to you?
I think one of the biggest ones for me was Vengeful Spirit.
Top played.
I mean, the most picked, and this is a hero that, I mean, it makes sense in the way that games are being played, but it's a hero like that wasn't really talked about. Wraith King was one that had gotten a lot of buffs and was kind of, seemed to be trending towards being picked. Tiny had gotten some recent busts, and that's always a hero that people like to pick at TI, it seems like, because he does a lot for teams, but he only had a 41% win rate. That was one other thing that I was really interested to see, was that a lot of these heroes that seem to have a lot of high value, Tiny, Ursa was thought to be like this really broken carry, and he only had a 42% win rate. Io only had a 40% win rate.
Yeah.
Bloodseeker sub 50.
50. I have 50. He's 30 games, 50, 15.
Okay.
Well, let's respect that, okay? Your Bloodseeker.
But yeah, I think that we saw some very interesting heroes kind of come out, and certainly there were ones that really mattered in specific series, like what do I think of? Phoenix was huge. Drow Ranger was huge.
Yeah. Drow's the interesting one to me, because the stats do back her up, that why she was kind of, I don't want to call it a cheese pick. She was definitely a flavor pick for some teams. VGJ Storm was one of those teams that in the NA qualifiers, I remember casting them quite a bit, and they picked Drow. That's what caught a lot of the teams off guard, I think. So It wasn't surprising to see them using it, but I think other teams, if anything, picked up on that, or they had that in mind too. Yeah, 69% win percentage with 29 games play. I mean, that's a very, very good. And these are stats that you kind of look at. You can take something from them, in my opinion, because this is the top teams playing against each other through a 2-week period. Like, there were no balance changes in between or whatever. These stats definitely mean something, in my opinion. So I see that. I see Drow Ranger strategy maybe needs to be toned down a little bit, perhaps, or teams need to respect it more, however you want to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, Drow was huge, and it also enabled a lot of heroes like Weaver, like Marana, like I was gonna say Wind Ranger, but Wind Ranger was terrible. But Storm Spirit had a lot of benefit from Drow, Bane as well, Lena. So that hero, I mean, conceptually is really insane if you actually look at what she does and how it makes it so all of your lanes just constantly pressure the other side of the map. And you don't even have to be there. Your lanes just push without you even showing ever. And the fact that we're kind of in this meta where it seems to really focus on, kind of poking harass in the lane. And then I think teams have gotten better and better at defending objectives. So it's even kind of like poking harass towards taking objectives and going high ground. So a hero that makes all of your ranged heroes better, makes all of your poke better, makes sense as being, I guess, really the highest win rate hero at the event that was picked more than
that was relevant.
15 times.
Yeah, scrolling down here, even at that, it's still hard to find one. Yeah, a couple maybe, but Earthshaker, again, we touched on it earlier a little bit too. That's the other one, honestly, that deserves a lot of respect. 61% win percentage. This was a top 10 picked hero, or I think maybe 11th or 12th. But either way, 49 games, 61% win percentage. Like I said in the grand final specifically, you saw that pick, you're just thinking like, oh, why did they let them get Earthshaker? And in game 5, it ended up working out for OG, but overall proved to be a dominant hero, and also just the way that it was played. Again, the Ags becoming a core on this hero where that was never really a thing, at least in recent history that I can recall. So another one of those cases that's fun to look at, again, when it comes to stats and how things worked out.
Definitely. And I mean, for the pub players out there, yes, we got a new patch, but it wasn't very big. There weren't a ton of changes that really affected the heroes. So you can kind of look at this and be like, these are probably good heroes that I should maybe start to play to win some MMR.
Enchantress, by far the most banned hero. And I think so much of that is, one, the Drow strategy is great. Two, is just she's one of the most dominant laners, I think you could argue, in the game, especially in that off lane. But then also just the annoying factor of that hero. Untouchable is one of the most annoying abilities in the game to deal with. So, yeah, not surprised to see her as by far the most banned hero.
And the fact that she gets a free healing salve every 30 seconds or whatever it is for Nature's attendance.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
And again, I go back to it's not like Valve or as far that they gave her new skills. I mean, it's just that's always been the case, at least for a long time. It's just
they kind of they buffed her a little bit too much, and then people. Yeah, that's the thing, is eventually figure out a new way to play a hero, or what the optimal way is, and then it becomes realized like, oh, this year was really, really strong.
Yeah, and it's like, can you shift that quickly at TI8? Some teams are better than other at doing so.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we made it through TI8 here in our coverage for at least this show. Fun event. Again, you got to even enjoy it in person. Sounds like it a lot of fun. I really did enjoy watching it from afar, despite not being able to make it. Valve killed it, man. They did fantastic. All the talent there, how many people they even had there. They used them all so effectively, in my opinion. Like I was even saying, even with the whole DJ Wee, Pyrian Flax late game show, especially that last one that they did, that was the only one I really watched. And they even brought on OG as a team after they had won it, and that was great. And had a lot of fun. So just fantastic event.
Yeah, that last show was really, really good. That was they compared to how TI7 ended and their really awkward interview all the way to their van. That was like the
just hurts
the
thinking about
game
it.
that we wanted to see, I think.
Well, yeah, that was great. Part of that was the Pyrian segment on that about how to celebrate winning TI8 in that video that they played. And,
yeah, absolutely.
All right. So again, I still can't believe I'm saying that. Winning TI8. Okay, so after TI8, naturally what happens is all the teams are like, all right, new season, let's just all disband and form new teams. To this day, I honestly still don't get that, but it happens every TI, and it's no different this time around. Now, again, don't want to go too long on this. It's still, we don't have the most time left in the show. But I do got the Reddit thread up. This is honestly the probably the best way to actually look at it right now to see what's going on. They do a good job of trying to keep it organized as much as possible.
Our next show will probably have a lot more to talk about this.
Yeah.
Right now, most of it's speculation. We don't want to be rumor mongering here on the DotA Procast. We're very much accurate and
facts.
Honorable journalists, right?
No fake news, facts. Off the bat, officially confirmed rosters. Again, take this as you will now. "Quote unquote" officially confirmed rosters. Anything can still happen in my mind, and it definitely has before. But you have some obvious teams, LGD and Virtus.pro being the biggest ones. They are officially sticking together with the roster. I can't say I'm the most surprised. Kinda. I mean, VP is a little interesting to me, but the only change I could see them making is maybe Solo, but are you really going to – Solo's been with that organization for so long. Is that really going to happen? So that's where I'm not surprised that they're making changes.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I can't really think of any player on this team that you would really want to replace.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if they need to stay within the CIS region, I can't really think of a offlaner that would replace Pasha. Can't really think of a mid that would replace no one. Carry that would replace Ramses. They all seem to be the best at their individual positions, and they obviously had a ton of success this year with this roster. So, maybe they need some sort of they need something else to get them over the hump at TI. Clearly, I don't know whether that's a mentality coach, or something beyond that. But as far as individual skill and team chemistry, this team seems to be the best CIS team that could be rostered currently.
The only reason I say Solo, again, not to say that he's a bad, deserves, no, that's not the case. I get why that wouldn't happen, and again, I'm not surprised to see them together. But as you're just getting at, this has been 2 years now with essentially this roster and upgrades in a lot of ways, and in my mind, definitely with Roger instead of Lil throughout this season, that they've done so well at points, and they've looked like the most dominant team, only to then fall flat, especially at TI7 and TI8 in this case. And to me, that leads. The biggest problem has been that leadership, it feels like, when it comes to adjusting to the meta. And so, again, that goes back to that's the only reason I can see maybe Solo you could argue. But I'm not surprised. This team still is very successful in a lot of ways. They still have a very large fan base, obviously, for them. They're keeping it the same. LGD, another one. Again, not surprised. Similar to the newbie situation, as I pointed out earlier. As last year, finished runner-up. Could have won in a lot of ways, but did not. This is a very strong roster. X-Nova and Chalice, need to remind you guys that they joined the roster kind of halfway through the season, really. So, now imagine with the rest of the season under their belt, a great TI8 run. I'm glad to see this team sticking together because this team definitely has a lot of potential to once again do very well into the next season. You mentioned Windstrike earlier. They are going to be staying the same. It was announced. Outside of that, there hasn't been much else really officially 5-man rosters that are staying the same. There are a couple of teams that have been announced, though, with kind of different rosters. And I think a big one to note is, of course, Resolution's new team, is as it's being labeled here. Resolution's new team. So we're looking at Resolution playing 1, Yawar at 2, Universe at 3, MSS at 4, and SVG at 5. So a little bit of a mix of VGJ Storm, basically without Snake King and bringing Universe. That sounds strong.
Yep. It does sound strong. And I've heard rumors that they're possibly like leaving the VGJ organization, going to Optic, or maybe being signed by someone else, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. But yeah, I mean, it's basically VGJ Storm, who had a wonderful season last year. Like, that's the only way to put it. They came out of nowhere, and then were arguably the best North American team up until this new EG roster formed right before TI. And the addition of Universe, it's interesting because Snaking played very well, and him and Universe are actually fairly similar in terms of the fact that they are like pretty farm intensive threes. I think the big thing though that Universe adds is just like stability, whereas Snaking may have occasionally fed in games where he, needed to not be doing that. Universe is a player that like basically will never do that at the wrong time. So maybe this is what they need to really kind of like break into that tier 1 conversation. We'll see.
This is one of those where I personally would have liked to see the roster stick together because I don't think I see what you're saying. I do think Snaking, though, in his own right, is comparable, if not better, in some ways compared to Universe. I feel like Universe, as of late, hasn't been necessarily performing as he was, back in the TI5, TI6 days especially. But the biggest difference for me, and I can see why they made the change, is the thing that Snaking, you can't blame him for, is the experience factor, right? Because on that big stage, Universe has been there before and doing it all, of course. That's, I think, what ultimately this team Resolution is bringing in. So, yeah, good to point out, though. Yeah, no longer part of VGJ Storm. Do feel a little bit bad for Jack on that one, considering what he had to go through this last season and putting the team together and everything. But welcome to the TI roster shuffle, baby. That's what happens.
Yeah, I assume he's still their manager, but I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. But as you brought up earlier, too, can they even be a team anymore with the whole VGJ situation and the two teams? So, yeah, that's one of the many things that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out here. So, again, out of the official confirmed roster so far, not too much else, really. I think it's crazy going over for, but other than maybe Na'Vi.
Yeah, that's the only other one that I was going to say that a lot of people probably...
Wait a second. Crystallize, Magical, Blizzy, Snako. Wait, who are they missing?
A 4.
Oh, they're missing Dendi. That's right.
Yeah, okay, that's pretty big news, right? Dendi not being with Na'Vi for the first time in Dota 2.
Ever, really? Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, ever, yeah. So, yeah, kind of having fun with that one, but, yeah, I guess we'll start there first off. Dendi no longer part of Na'Vi. It was officially announced. It's a mutual agreement. I got to say I called this, not going to lie. I did call this earlier on. Not that it was the craziest thing ever, but to me it just seemed like you're getting to a point with Na'Vi. They've had many struggles these last couple of seasons, and not to say it's on Dendi by any means, but eventually, where do you prioritize winning over this name in Dendi and what he brings to the table? So, he is still going to play Pro Dota. Now, what I did think would possibly happen is that he's still going to be under their brand and maybe like stream for them, kind of like an Admiral Bulldog situation, but I don't think that's the case. I think he fully has left Na'Vi, as far as what I know. So that I do find interesting, actually. But who knows? We'll see where he ends up.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of hard to figure out where that's going to be, right? Because VP has their roster locked in. We've got Na'Vi roster. I mean, will he end up on Empire? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's like the other big CIS org, really. Or will he form his own team? You've got
Will they go somewhere else? I mean, does it need to be in CIS?
yeah, maybe he'll team up with Puppy and be on Secret.
A lot of
Who
people
knows?
would love that. Yes.
People would love that.
He's not replacing Mid One though. I'm sorry.
No. But I mean, it's it's the end of an era, but
Mm-hmm.
I would still love to see him play. I think a lot of people would. I don't think necessarily that he was the issue. Maybe he wasn't the top tier mid laner that they needed to carry games, but I don't feel like he was ultimately the issue on that team either. So
Yeah. It's hard to truly. I'm not sitting here watching, Navi practice throughout the years by any means, but it's that one thing where if something isn't working, what is that consistent factor that's been with it all the time? It is Dendi. So I go back to that logic, whether or not it's right. Time will tell once again. But again, he did make it clear. Dendi did tweet that he does still plan to play pro Dota. So I see people talking about, is he retiring or whatever. Not the case. He's still, God, how old is he? He's in the later 20s, I want to say.
yeah, I think he's like 27, 28.
Which, it's definitely still playable for right now. And as time goes on, he's 28, it looks like, according to Wikipedia. So he's going to be turning 29 coming up the season. But still, I mean, Solo, he's 29 years old and going to become 30 in the upcoming season. So there's definitely some air quotes here, older players. I'm sitting here 31 and thinking that I'm a grandpa over here, but in the big scheme of things, it's really not that crazy to know that he still plans to continue to play. Now, I don't think he's a top 10 mid player, honestly, in the world anymore by any means, but he could definitely still help out a team. There has to be a team out there that can definitely still benefit, not only from his skill, but frankly his marketing power, right? Like, we're talking about one of the top marketing hell, is he the most marketable player in Dota 2? Like, who else would be more than him, right? Like, outside of China.
Yeah.
I guess China maybe more, but
yeah, China's a whole different story. I mean, obviously, like Burning, Zhao, those guys maybe are far beyond anything in the Western scene. But I mean, arguably, maybe like Sumail, maybe Arteezy, one of those two. But it'll be interesting to see because there's been a few rumblings of some other fairly large gaming orgs like Envious.
Yes.
Or I feel like there was a couple other ones.
I know. Yeah, there's been a couple throughout time that I've made the point. Yeah.
And I mean, the thing is that's what TI does. Every single TI. Damn, we really should get a Dota team. I mean, 25 million sounds real nice.
It keeps going up. Yeah, you figure they would have realized by now, right? But
yeah, so it'd be interesting if one of those was like, well, the 25 mil would be nice, but it'd also be nice to have the most marketable Western player who's he speaks good English.
Yeah.
So you could really be anywhere in the Western scene.
Oh yeah.
Technically, so.
I'm going to make that prediction that he goes outside of CIS. Because like you're saying, you have Empire, you have Vega Squadron maybe, but I don't see him joining a CIS organization really to then...
What about Complexity? Complexity is like, they have all that Dallas Cowboy money behind them.
Bring it on!
All about spectacle. Like, that would be real interesting.
I would not mind him as a mid for Complexity. I mean, I think that would be fun. Now, Complexity, speaking of them, they're kind of one of those interesting teams too.
They're fully disbanded, right?
I don't know if I would say fully disbanded. Moo left them. Yeah, Moo is part of ways with the Complexity. He's looking for a new team. I think Z-Freak as well as
Moon Meander's also out.
Limp. Yeah, Moon Meander's also. So Z-Freak and Limp, I believe, are the two right now. I think Adam's also out.
Yeah, Adam is out.
Complexity will reveal a new roster in potentially 1 to 2 weeks. So, yeah, obviously for me, and as you bring up, that's going to be one at least close to my heart that I'm curious to see who they end up with. I mean, you're right. It's hell. Man, that wouldn't be the craziest thing. We're seeing more and more of that, honestly, with these players coming overseas to play for other teams and all over the place. So, I'm not going to sit here and try to predict. Like I said, but next week will come around. We'll have plenty more information and still won't be fully clear. But at least we'll have a better idea as far as what we're looking at. So,
Yep.
I don't know if there's really much else, though, to go on that. Again, there is this Reddit post, so if you're really curious, you can check it out for yourself as well. Keep updated as much as possible. LGD Ame fan says Optic Gaming disbanded. I love it. LGD Ame fan, man. Who is it? When are we going to find out who this account is?
Well, apparently it's CCNC because he's been leaking rosters left and right.
Yeah, I know. I've heard that too, yeah. I've heard Bulba, CCNC, IX Mike. Like, there's so many names that I've heard that this account apparently is.
I'm sure it's just like some manager or something like that on one of the teams.
Yeah, it's like none of them at all.
Yeah. But, yeah.
Interesting. There's sorry, I'm just kind of getting caught up in this now.
Oh,
Anyways.
jeez. Are you fiending right now?
Yeah.
On stream?
I've never really actually looked through all these. But again, these are all just like rumors or just random accounts, so you really can't take much, if anything, from it. Honestly, the whole... Didn't Sumail say something about how EG staying together? Or did he not?
Yeah, he did. He did on I think he was on somebody's stream. He like commented in their chat.
Yeah. But see, even that, like people like that take that at its word. I'm like, I don't. I do not take that at its word at all.
Yeah, it's definitely not officially confirmed by the EG website, but you'd have to imagine that they probably would stay together.
Yeah.
Unless, there's the only thing I can think of is that maybe Fly has some sort of conflict because I don't know what his situation is with OG, and obviously his girlfriend is still the manager of OG. And
is she really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
That is awkward. I don't know if that's awkward though. That's also like kind of cool, I guess. But yeah, that's something we didn't really touch on. It's the whole No-Tail versus Fly situation.
Right.
Now, what I did find more interesting with that drama was when Crit shoulder bumped No-Tail. Now that was something.
You read into that?
Did you not watch it? Crit literally, but no, I don't care what you say. Crit purposely bumped into No-Tail. Like he was looking at, he was pissed off. That was something. The whole looking at each other with the handshakes, that was whatever. I didn't get sold on that.
Really? I thought that was really hype. I was like right up next to the stage when that happened. That was some real shit.
It was hype. I mean, no, it's again, as a sports fan altogether, I love seeing stuff like that. Obviously, the storyline's there. It's perfect in a lot of ways. It's cool to see that true emotion that, I don't want to say they truly hate each other now, but at the same time, maybe there is a bit. There was an interview that Casey did with No-Tail asking, about the Fly situation. He put it down right away. He's like, I don't want to talk about it. Maybe after this whole event is done and, we'll see, but we're just not going to talk about it. There is clearly bitterness there, and understandably so, with how we hear it played out. So, that's gonna
for
be
sure.
That's going to be fun. Hell, OGs, we don't even know if they're going to be the same, by the way.
Right, yeah. There was some, like, AMA that Anna did in Ferev's stream chat, like, last week, where he was saying that he wasn't really sure if he wanted to still play Pro Dota. So... I mean, who knows?
Anna, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So young, but that's a lot of money. he can be fine leaving at this point. Anyways, I think we're good to start wrapping things up here. I know that we wanted to mention maybe a little real quickly about the upcoming season. Like I said, you got the site right here. This was from the official announcement that happened initially. We don't really have any more information other than apparently a major qualifier is supposed to be starting September 17th, which is basically 2 weeks away. So, chop.
Right. Like, where's the major? Who's organizing it? Who's playing it?
Minor details, right? Minor details. Don't worry. We don't even have teams yet, man. It's still roster situation figured out. Let's give it a little more time, all right? Yeah, Dota does this every year again. It feels like so unorganized, especially initially, and then it all comes together usually. But here we are in that spot of wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is just good incentive for you guys to tune in next week because we'll have a lot more to talk about, it seems like.
I like it. All right, so I think that is good to wrap up on. once again, want to thank you as always for tuning in. I know it hasn't been, or it's been a little bit since we've had a show, guys. We had the pre-TI and then even before that. But with the new season upon us, I am definitely getting back in the groove myself. I know you've always done your thing with the whole alchemy site there, elevated, and keep the Dota grind going. So that's the plan now. Once again, to get the routine going again with the new season upon us. More to talk about when it comes to Dota. So usually aim for this time every single week. That's Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Obviously, we'll let you know ahead of time if anything changes, but that is the idea. And hopefully many guests will also be joining us throughout the season that is to come as well. So anything else before we officially sign us off?
No, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
All right, without further ado, have a good night, guys. Thank you once again. Hopefully you enjoyed TI8. I know you did. We'll be back next week to catch up more on the roster shuffle, as well as hopefully have more information on what the season holds for us coming forward. Have a good night, guys. We'll see you next time.